10 out of 10. And if you think any differently, well, I respect your opinion, and I respect you even more for having it. Hey guys, I'm Josh, this is Josh Build Stuff, and today we are building the all-new Ultimate Collector Series A-wing Starfighter. In this video, we will of course talk about the set itself, what I like, what I don't like about it. We will talk about the build process. We'll compare this version of the LEGO A-wing Starfighter to some older A-wings that LEGO has also made, and we will compare this Ultimate Collector Series set to a couple of other Ultimate Collector Series sets that have come out in the last couple of years. Of course, we will also include a speed build of this ship at the end of the video, so stick around for that. All that being said, let's start out by looking at the box. This set costs $200, which sounds like a lot, but for the Ultimate Collector Series sets, that's kind of on the lower end. We can see by the box, this set contains 1,673 pieces and is recommended for ages 18 plus. Now, much like the LEGO Star Wars helmets that just came out, this box is sporting the very minimalist, black, modern, sleek look that is definitely intended to appeal to older audiences like myself. I think it looks very cool. The back of the box is similarly minimalist. It shows a couple of more detailed pictures of the ship itself as well as some dimensions of it, but other than that, there's not a whole lot to see on the box. So this is the A-wing Starfighter, and the first question that a lot of people are going to ask is this set worth $200? I recently asked in a previous video if you would rather have this set or the 3 Star Wars helmets you see behind me, which altogether are about $180. In my opinion, I'd rather have this set. Not only is it the last in the Starfighter line of LEGO Ultimate Collector Series ships, the others being the Y-wing, the B-wing, and the X-wing, I think this ship is really cool. It's really scaled up, which we'll also talk about in a second. But unlike a lot of the other big ships, this ship is very smooth and sleek looking, doesn't have a lot of little intricate details on it, and I like that about it. So is this ship worth $200? Yeah, I think so. LEGO is definitely aiming towards people with a lot of disposable income, or people with a lot of tolerance for debt. 24% isn't that much for credit card interest rate, right? But if we think about the price per piece ratio, the usual accepted amount is 10 cents per piece. In LEGO Star Wars case, it's usually a little more, and so $200 for 1,600, almost 1,700 pieces really isn't that bad. So talking about the ship itself, we've seen a lot of different versions of the A-wing across different Star Wars franchises. The designers of this set said that they wanted the most iconic version, that being where it was first seen, and that was in Episode 6. We can tell that obviously by its dark red distinct color, but it's also got a lot of details like this little red patch here. If you remember the classic scene where the A-wing gets shot and careens out of control into the Death Star's bridge, this is the version of the A-wing that we see because you can see that little red patch on its left side. From a build perspective, this was a pretty fun build. It's obviously large, so it took a little bit of time. I would say about 5 or 6 hours. I built it over 2 nights, but I wasn't really rushing. The build itself was similar to other builds of this same scale of ship, where you build a large interior structure made of mostly Technic pieces. It ends up being pretty colorful. Then you build these outside pieces which get attached to the outside, kind of Voltron style, and then little details get added on top as you go, and then in the end you're left with a big, in my opinion, pretty beautiful ship. Again, LEGO has that 18 plus age recommendation. I think that's definitely supposed to be who's willing to buy this set and not who's capable of building it, because it didn't have any build techniques that were too tricky that a 14, 15, 12-year-old could build. I don't know what kids are capable of. But I think people of a slightly younger age could definitely build this, not just 18 plus, but they may have to bring someone who is over the age of 18 just so they can afford the $200 price point. So let's talk about some of the details of this ship itself. Obviously, the ship is removable from its display stand, but one thing I don't like about it that I'll mention now is that it doesn't have any landing gear, and so I can't actually set this down unless you want it to look like it's just crashed. unless I'm setting it on the stand. It's kind of because it has these big old fin pieces in the back. In some smaller versions of A-wings that LEGO's made in the past, they've managed to put landing gear in them. We'll look at those in a few minutes, but I kind of wish that this set had that same thing. I've seen a couple of people online that are complaining that they wish they had a minifigure scale version of the A-wing, but for one, that would be a much smaller model, and it wouldn't show quite the level of detail that this does. The designers of this set compared the A-wing model to a mixture between a fighter jet and a sports car, in that it doesn't really look like a spaceship. It doesn't have a bunch of greeblies and little bits and pieces along the outside that make it look like a big spaceship like the Millennium Falcon or even the A-wing Starfighter. Instead, this looks really sleek and smooth, and so the designers even commented on how many studs they wanted to show along the top as opposed to the smooth pieces, because the ship itself is very smooth. That being said, I think the model turns out to be really solid. Obviously, I'm not shy about handling this piece and moving it around. I feel really confident that it's going to stay together, where if I were holding the Y-wing or a different, bigger set, I'd be afraid of knocking off little pieces, like the piece there, that piece. If I were more carelessly handling another version of the ship at this same scale, I may be afraid of knocking off little pieces, as it's got a lot on every surface, but this one I feel fairly confident in moving around. Then again, I can't put it down because no landing gear. I actually learned a lot about A-wing Starfighters just from looking up research on this particular model, and it's apparently the fastest ship in the Rebel fleet. It's got big old engines. It's designed as an interceptor type craft to get in, do its mission, and get out before being seen. In terms of lore, this ship is known to have guns that can swivel either forward or backwards, and so it's cool that they included the detail on this ship. They also included that same functionality on some older versions of LEGO A-wings, which we'll look at in a minute. The interior of this ship is also nicely detailed. It's got a big comfy chair, a joystick in the middle, but it's definitely oversized for a minifigure to sit inside, which again, I'm okay with because of the level of detail we get on a larger set. Now, most days, I don't like to pick out the negatives or nitpick little mundane details, but today isn't most days. On Brickset.com, user Captain Rex 101 posted an article which said that there were 5 plaque errors on the A-wing Starfighter plaque. Now, most of these little errors I'm okay with. The W in A-wing most of the time is shown as not being capitalized. The manufacturer, Kuat System Engineering, should be Systems Engineering. The K in the hyperdrive designation should be lowercase, not uppercase. The weapons system that's listed should be missile launchers, not a missile launcher. All that I'm pretty willing to overlook. But the one thing that is apparently a debate among the Star Wars community is the actual length of an A-wing Starfighter. Now, on the plaque, it is listed as 9.6 meters, which seems big for a single-pilot fighter. I think a lot of this debate originated around the original A-wing models that were made for the movies. In some, they would show the pilot really cramped up inside, where others it would look like the pilot has a lot of space to move around. And so there's a little bit of debate of whether it's a 9-meter ship or a 6.9-meter ship. So the source that Captain Rex lists is a book that's called Star Wars Rebel Starfighters, Alliance and Resistance Models. That apparently lists it as 6.9 meters. However, if you go to StarWars.com and the databank, it literally lists the A-wing as 9.6 meters. Then you go to Wikipedia, which I think is more sourced by fans than actual Lucasfilm Star Wars people, but they have it listed as 6.9 meters. Then, if we look at some literature that I have on hand, this first book, Star Wars Complete Vehicles, which was published in, granted, 2013, it has the A-wing Starfighter listed as the larger length, 9.6 meters. Another book I have that is literally called Star Wars Ships of the Galaxy has the A-wing, again, the longer length, 9.6 meters. This book, 2015. Star Wars Absolutely Everything You Need to Know, ironically, doesn't have the length of an A-wing, so this was no help. All that being said, I think you'll have to decide for yourself what you want to believe the length of an A-wing Starfighter is. Do your own research. I'm more inclined to believe that the LEGO plaque is incorrect, and they sourced it from one of these many sources that do list it as 9.6 meters, but the ship being 6.9 meters feels a little more correct if you think about how large a pilot is standing next to it. Conspiracy theories aside, LEGO has made a couple of different versions of the A-wing Starfighter, so let's see how this Ultimate Collector series stacks up against some of those. Here we have some older versions of A-wings that LEGO has released in the past. The Resistance A-wing apparently being piloted by a pig because I have a 2-year-old. Okay, starting with the oldest model, this is the A-wing from 2013, so 7 years ago at this point, and this model was 177 pieces, which is just about 1/10 of the big version, so this is about 10 times as many pieces as this, but this is the closest actual version to this same one. The engines on this one were much more green. It's got that same little red patch, but it's on the other side compared to this one. But it's got some of the same details, the 2 cannons on each side, the canopy that opens. One detail I really like about this version that isn't included in this version is that the sticker on the interior actually shows a little Star Destroyer bridge, and written in Arabesh is the word warning, as if this is the A-wing that is attacking the second Death Star, and it's just been shot and is about to crash into the bridge of a Star Destroyer. From 2019, so much more recent, this is obviously a microfighter. This came as a 2-pack with this A-wing and I believe Kylo Ren's TIE Fighter, also in microfighter scale. This was released in 2019, and so I think the blue version is supposed to be the version that we see in Episode 8, The Last Jedi, where we see the blue coloration of the A-wing. Obviously, this isn't super comparable to the big version because it's very small, it's a different color, and it's from a completely different movie. I believe this also came out in 2019, along with the other Rise of Skywalker ships, and so we were anticipating seeing a green A-wing and a red Y-wing, if I'm remembering correctly, as a part of the line of new ships for that movie. Whether or not we actually saw a green A-wing in that movie, I can't remember, but in any case, this is the Resistance A-wing. Obviously, this version of the A-wing is meant to be a later version of this model, and so it definitely has a few changes in detail, but at this scale it's a little hard to see. I will point out that the Resistance A-wing as well as the A-wing from 2013 both have landing gear of some sort, so they can both be set down nicely on a surface, something that the Ultimate Collector series did not have. So it's not much of a comparison between these different A-wings. Obviously, if anyone were forced to choose between them, they're probably going to choose the big new one, unless budget is an issue, in which case maybe this will be the one they go with. All that being said, let's compare this big, detailed, expensive model to a couple of other big, expensive, detailed models that LEGO has come out with in the last couple of years. What we have here, in my opinion, are 3 of the more comparable models that LEGO have released in recent years. Here we have the Ultimate Collector Series Snowspeeder, released in 2017. This is the Ultimate Collector Series Y-wing Starfighter, released in 2018. And then, of course, the A-wing, which was released in 2020. One other set that is almost as comparable as these two is another set that was also released on May 4th, this one in 2019, also for $200. That was the Tantive 4. However, this is not an Ultimate Collector Series set, and so it doesn't get to play today. Now, looking at these 3 sets, each one of these costs $200. The Snowspeeder was, I think, around 1,700 pieces, the Y-wing closer to 1,900 pieces, and so the A-wing has the fewest pieces out of all 3 of these. It's worth noting that the A-wing is not in scale with, I think, either of these ships. A Y-wing is much larger than an A-wing in reality. How it compares to a Snowspeeder, I'm not so sure. In terms of minifigure scale, the Y-wing is probably closest to that in that it fits really one minifigure in the cockpit and has room for a single droid in the back, which makes sense because that's who pilots the Y-wing. Both the A-wing and the snowspeeder have oversized seats in them that look pretty comfortable in my opinion, but they're definitely much larger than a minifigure would fit in, so I think they were built larger on purpose just to show that extra level of detail. I mentioned earlier about the sleekness of the A-wing and how many smooth surfaces it has as opposed to surfaces covered in studs, and the Y-wing may be the ship that's the most in contrast with that aspect because it's absolutely covered in little individual details of greeblies and bits and pieces that if you were to pick up and move this set around, I'd be really afraid of knocking all those off. Whereas the A-wing and even the snowspeeder to a small degree have much smoother surfaces overall. So I think it's a really nice contrast if you have these couple of ships sitting right next to each other. Also, I said it earlier, the A-wing has no landing gear, and it's worth noting that both the Y-wing and the snowspeeder both managed to put landing gear in Ultimate Collector Series sets, and so I see no reason why they couldn't have done the same with the A-wing. In terms of minifigures, I've seen some people complain that Ultimate Collector Series ships only come with one or maybe two minifigures, and that kind of makes sense since you're paying a lot of money. You a lot of times are paying for the minifigures, and larger sets tend to have more figures. But in these cases, it obviously lines up. A snowspeeder, which takes 2 pilots to pilot, has 2 minifigures with it. The Y-wing, which incorporates a single pilot and a single droid, comes with minifigures for each of those. And the A-wing, which it's pointed out in multiple sources that it's not flown with the assistance of a droid, is a single pilot craft, and so it makes sense that only a single pilot was included with this set. Overall, if I were giving an impression of how the A-wing stacks up in direct comparison to these other 2 sets, I would say it's a pretty close competition, but I really like the Y-wing because of its size. I like the snowspeeder because it's got a lot of really interesting shapes that all came together in a really cool build. The A-wing is simpler, but I don't think we can fault it for being so because that's just how the ship was designed. The A-wing is also newer, and so I'm more excited by it right now. So I'm not going to rank them 1, 2, and 3. I will say that the A-wing is about to go somewhere on my shelves, whereas the snowspeeder and Y-wing are going back into bags, back into bins. But that really has more to do with the fact that it's new than the fact that I would like it more than the others. So we've talked about the good, we've talked about the bad, and my overall opinion for this set has not changed. I mentioned it at the beginning of the video. I think this set is a 9 out of 10. For $200 you get a really nice display model. It's a ship that we haven't seen in this scale before, so I think it fits in really nicely with the existing UCS line. In terms of the ship itself, there's not a whole lot I would change. If they wanted that 10 out of 10, they should have just given me some landing gear. Obviously, there is some ongoing debate about the actual length of an A-wing Starfighter, so please let me know in the comments below if you think that this ship is 9.6 meters or 6.9 meters. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, please feel free to like and subscribe. If you've made it this far, you may be sticking around for a speed build. If so, that build is starting right now. See you next time.